Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Get Things Rolling with RealFlow for Cinema, version 2.5. I would like to welcome you all to the webinar and also thank you for your patience. So as you know, this webinar is dedicated to the latest version of RealFlow Cinema 4D. This is a major minor update, as we say, and we call it a major minor update because it is still version 2. The second version of the software, but it has so many improvements and also new features that it's almost like a new version. You know, we released 2.5 about 2 weeks ago when we were supposed to have the webinar, and hopefully you have already been able to test it using the demo version, or you have purchased it and you are trying the full version. Actually, if you have version 2 already, if you are version 2 customers, you can find a free update in your customer portal in the download area. So you can just go there and download it, install, and should work great. If you have version 1 and you haven't upgraded yet, you can do so now, and you have an extra discount. We have a special promo for version 2.5. It is about 25% on the upgrade price. So you can do so from your customer portal. Just go there and follow the steps, and you'll see your special offer, and you'll see it until the 15th of April. Then it will go back to the original upgrade price. And if you want to buy a new license, regardless of whether you already have the software or not, you can do so with an extra promo. We have a special offer for you, for all the people attending the webinar. It is this promo code that you can see on your screens right now. So the promo code is Rolling30. Is the name of the webinar. You get 30% off the new license price, and you have 1 week to use the promo code until April the 3rd. It applies only to new license purchases, no lock licenses. And what you should do is go to the web shop and add the promo code at the very last step. So you add the product to your cart, and then you go next, and very last step you add the promo code. So you see the change in price at the end. Just be patient. So the aim of this webinar is to give you an overview of what is new and show you how the new version works. There is already a blog post that you can see on the RealFlow blog with all the details. And today Thomas will take you through a few of them, and he has two very cool examples to show you. Thomas is a RealFlow specialist who has been part of the RealFlow team for about 5 years now. He's the man behind the RealFlow blog, the one who prepares the release posts and all the tips that you can find there. Very, very useful information. He serves as a link between users and developers because he sends the RealFlow dev team customer feedback and bugs, and he helps find workarounds to overcome some software limitations. One important thing before we proceed: if you have any questions, please send them to the email that you see below, webinar25@nextlimit.com, and then we'll gather up all the questions, we'll answer them, and we'll probably post the answers on the blog. We'll let you know. Thank you very much. So enough from me. I'll leave now the floor to Thomas, so you can tell you all the cool things about RealFlow for Cinema 2.5. There you go, Thomas.
All right. I hope you can hear me all. So thank you very much for the introduction, Jana, and hello to everyone. First of all, let me say welcome to our webinar, Get Things Rolling with RealFlow for Cinema 4D 2.5. My name is Thomas Schlick, and I'm a product specialist here at Next Limit Technologies. And I also want to say sorry that we had to postpone this presentation, but I had a pretty bad cold and lost my voice. But now I'm back again, and in the next 30 minutes, I want to talk you through the most important novelties of our fluid simulation plugin. And for this purpose, I've prepared 2 projects. The first scene contains the simulation for the visual of our 2.5 announcement, where a tire model is rolling over a street after heavy rainfall. I was really aiming for a still image here, and I want to show you how to work with the new mesh channel feature. In the second project, I will be talking about the usage of the mesh weight maps and the new visualizer tool. And in the last part, I want to give you a quick overview of some other features and workflow improvements. So let's start right ahead with the first project. And to save us some time, I don't want to go through the entire creation process because the setup is really not difficult, and I'm sure that you know how to add simulation nodes from the RealFlow menu. But I will guide you through the most important settings. So let me show you the result first. And here you can see the aforementioned tire running through a shallow layer of water, producing lots of splashes and drops. But you can also see that the splashes have the appearance of white water, while the calm parts here have a bluish tone. And this effect can be achieved with mesh channels. So let me switch over to Cinema 4D. Yeah, and that's my setup already. And one of the most important rules in terms of fluid simulation is to keep things as simple as possible. You don't need any surrounding objects or the render environment here, because all these extra objects make things more complex than necessary. What I really need for the simulation is a bounding box for the water you can see here, and the tire model. And this tire should be interacting with the water, so it's a good idea to take a closer look at it. The object information tells us that the tire model has roughly 104,000 polygons, and that's quite a lot when we consider that it's basically a cylinder. And therefore, I've introduced such a simple cylinder as a proxy object. You can see it here. Let me make this one invisible. And it's also animated. And in the final render, I've replaced the cylinder to the tire model again. Yeah, and then we have to fill the bounding box here with particles, and this is done through a fill emitter, this one here. And let me demonstrate the workflow in a new scene. And here we have the bounding box again, and when you add an emitter, the fill emitter, RealFlow also creates this fluid container here and links both elements together, the emitter and the fluid, over this links field here. So they're connected. And with the fluid's resolution parameter, it's possible to control the number of particles. But before we start to create the particles, we have to consider a few things. And here I want to fill the objects inside. So everything outside this box should be solid. So I'm going to add a volume tag to the bounding box and set its volume mode to solid outside. And this creates a hollow block. And then we have to adjust the quality of the bounding object's collision geometry. It's a rather large object, as you can see here. It's 1,800 centimeters length. And a cell size of 10 centimeters, that's a default value, turned out to be a good value here for me. And to tell RealFlow that this container should be interacting with the water at all, we also need a collider tag. And here I'm going to keep the default settings. And now we can link the container to the fill emitter. Now we have this body field here, and all you have to do is to drag the bounding box object to this body slot. And now you can already see some particles. And here's also the first improvements of the 2.5 version. The fill emitter has a new particle distribution option where you can choose whether you want to fill an object or cover it with particles. And here I've chosen the fill volume option, of course. And then we have to determine the fill mode. We have a hollow block as said, and hollow means that the inner part here is the non-solid region. Takes a moment, and here we are. And finally, I can adjust the water level with a fill ratio Y parameter. Yeah, this is exactly what I did in the working scene. So let me switch back to it. And you can certainly imagine that the water layer's height has a strong influence on the quality and intensity of our splashes. but the Y position here of the entire object has a strong influence as well. And these two factors are really subject to testing. And then we also have to adjust the proxy object's collision geometry. So we have volume and collider tags again. And cell size in the volume tag is going to be 2 centimeters here, but this really depends on the size of your own model. The surface offset parameter makes the collision geometry thicker, and this results in a better collision detection. And volume mode is set to solid inside here. Yeah, and to get enough particles, I've increased the fluid's resolution to 45, and this results in roughly 730,000 particles. The remaining fluid parameters keep the default values here. Yeah, and now for the demons. Of course, we need a gravity demon to introduce a force and make the particles fall down. And I also want to delete stray particles with a K volume demon. It's that one here, because it might happen that some particles will go through the bounding box. And the fall off, which is turned on by default, is not necessary here. So I set the associated fall off value to 0%. And a state like this is normally a good time for a first simulation, but the results can be rather poor and disappointing. And I want to show you what I get with the default settings. We hardly have any interaction here because the particles collapse under the influence of gravity, and the entire object is also rather fast. So the next step is to improve RealFlow's accuracy. And this is done in the Scene Object Solver tab. You can see it here. And here I've increased substeps to 5 and 13 to get more interaction between the fast-moving cylinder and the water. Iterations of 25 and 30 help me to stabilize the fluid. And substeps are indeed a very good method to control the intensity of our splashes, as you can see in another video. And now we have more splashes. We have a few drops and these tendrils, but it's still not really satisfying. So we have to find other ways to improve the water. Of course, there are many ways to control the splashes. You can use a thicker water layer, for example, as said before. You can experiment with different object speeds. You can also scale the entire object or its collider tag. Sorry, I was muted for a moment. I hope you can hear me again.
Yes, all good.
Okay. So as said, we have many ways to control the splashes here, and I was talking about a few ones already. And here I was using the sheeter demon. And the sheeter demon is used to fill the holes between the particles and create better splashes. We have lots of particles already, and they're also nearby. So the main hole detection parameter, that's mid cavity size, can be rather small. By default, it's 2.0, and here I've set it to 1.25. And then I've also deactivated the use velocity alignment option. And to make the water break up in drops again, I've activated the demon's relative speed option. So only particles within the given min and max velocity or speed range will be considered by the daemon. And of course, I want to show you the result with the sheeter daemon. And this is way better. But in my opinion, everything's a bit too chaotic now. And the splashes become really massive, and there are also lots of drops. And therefore, I've added a drag force daemon, this one here. This daemon introduces something like air friction, and I use it in many simulations, even if the value is very low, like in this case, it's just 0.07, because drag balances the forces and makes everything smoother, and will also calm down things a little. And finally, we have a K isolated daemon to clean the simulations from stray particles, especially towards the end. and isolated particles will be deleted after 0.2 seconds. Yeah, and I also want to show you the final particle simulation, of course. And as you've certainly recognized already, we have some color-coded information here, and in fact, that's speed. So faster areas appear white, and the amount of blue and white areas can be controlled through the fluid container's display tab. It's that one here. And here we have this min and max range values. So by changing the values, we can influence the gradient here. And let me switch to another frame with more splashes and make the volume invisible. And then you can switch to automatic range, for example. And then you have more blue colors. And you can use these values here as a reference for your own settings. So with 7, for example, we have more white spots again. And with a value of 12, we get a nicely balanced look. And we can precisely transfer the speed information to the mesh, because this workflow with minimum and maximum values is now part of the mesh node. So let me create a new measure. And a property like speed, as you can see it here, is also called a channel. And in RealFlow for Cinema 4D 2.5, we have added the vorticity and age channels. And if you want to use vorticity, you have to activate this channel in the fluid container as well. And on the fluid, you can see this compute vorticity option. And the reason why it's inactive by default is simply simulation speed. Vorticity hardly contributes to the simulation, but it takes some time to be calculated, and in Diverso, everything's optimized for speed. So if you want to create vorticity maps, don't forget to activate it. And that's important before the simulation starts. Yeah, and we also have a new weight maps option here, but let's focus on speed because weight maps will be discussed in the second project. So when you check these channels, RealFlow will add new vertex maps when the mesh is being built. And let me activate the speed tag here. And I'm going to use test settings to speed up the mesh creation process. So don't worry about the quality. I add a little smoothing and leave all the rest to its default settings. And now take a look at the measure, please, while I'm building the mesh. Should be pretty fast. Yeah, and here we are. And now we have 4 tags, and that's velocity, X, Y, and Z. And here's our speed tag. And the speed information ranges between 0 and 1 by default. And this means that we'll be seeing a lot of white water, because every particle with a speed greater than 1 meter per second will be displayed in white. And experienced users certainly remember that we had a very abstract scale parameter here instead of actual ranges, and it was very difficult to find working values. And the only way to preview the changes of this scale parameter was to start a render job, but that's a thing of the past. In 2.5, you only have to click on a tag to switch to Cinema 4D standard preview mode for vertex maps. And now we can really adjust the values with instance feedback. So I can use the auto option again, and we have more red colors. And again, you see these values here you can use as a reference. And with 7, we have more white water again and yellow colors. And with 11, we can see the colors fading towards the rear part of the mesh. And of course, we want to render this particular look. And for better visibility, I'm going to create 2 opaque materials. That's blue for the slower parts and white for the splashes. So nothing really difficult, just some colors. And the white one. All right. Blue is going to be the base color, and therefore it's the first material. White defines the splashes, and it's the second material. And the vertex map here defines how much of the blue color will shine through the white material. So open the white material and activate the alpha channel, and then go to the effects menu. And there you will find this vertex map entry here. You click on the white square and drag the speed tag to this vertex map field. And that's all. And when I render the frame now, we can really see the color distribution from the preview. And of course, this concept also works with transparent materials. So when you change the range values here, you will see the result in the viewport directly. But with smoothing length scale, it's a bit different. This new parameter is like a blurring filter for the vertex maps, and you will get smoother transitions. The range goes from 0 to 10, but changes require that the meshes have to be rebuilt. So that's really important. Yeah, and I've also prepared a comparison of 4 stills with different speed ranges. Okay, the first image here uses the auto option. The second one has been rendered with a min-max range between 0 and 5, and this gives a lot of white water. Image 3 is between 0 and 11, and the last version here uses values between 8 and 10, and we have more of these blue drops. So the new workflow gives you much more control over the look of the mesh and definitely reduces the number of test renders. I've also prepared a list with the new features we've been using so far. So we have improvements on the fill emitter and introduced a new particle layer option. We have new vorticity and H channels for meshes. And we have removed the old scale parameter and replaced it by precise ranges. Okay, let's take a look at some other new features, the visualizer and weight maps. Before we start with the project, let me show you the result. So in this scene, you see a stylized globe with differently colored fluids inside a hidden sphere. And the fluids are driven by several demons, and they're mixing over time and create these nice color blending effects. And of course, I also want to show you the setup. So let me close these projects first. Okay. I've made almost everything invisible to get a better view of what's really important. As said, the fluid is inside a sphere. So we have a collider tag and a volume tag again. And the volume tag's volume mode is solid to outside, and this creates a hollow sphere. The fluid itself has a very high surface tension of 2000 to get this paint-like behavior you've seen before. And the special thing here is that we have 3 emitters, and their particles will be mixing under the influence of these 3 demons. And the combination of different demons often makes it difficult to evaluate the resulting force field, and therefore we've introduced the visualizer. So I'm going to make these things invisible here. And all you have to do is to apply a visualizer from the demons menu. And here you see the visualizer. The visualizer itself has a bounding box, and this box can be rescaled and repositioned. And you simply add the demons you want to analyze to this field here, demons. And let's take the attractor first. And you can see already this force field with arrows. And the visualizer itself, the attractor here, its strength is controlled through a simple expression. And here we have 3 nodes. One of these nodes is time, and time is connected to a simple formula. And this formula calculates the sine from the current time value. And the values are then multiplied here to get a force that's strong enough to influence the particles. And finally, it's connected to the attractor's internal force. And the result is an oscillation effect with attraction and repulsion forces. And the first step for me is to change the resolution to get a better preview quality. And here I'm going to use low to medium. And now you have a much denser field already. And then you can choose how the forces will be shown as arrows, lines, or points. And here I'm going to use lines. And then we have streamlets. They give you a sense of time and how the forces actually evolve. And it's even possible to move your demons or scrub the timeline now. And the visualizer will be updated in real time. And now you can also see this oscillation effect I was talking about before. And when I add the noise field here, for example, then I get the combined field. And you can also see that we have a fall off here because these lines, they get shorter towards the edge of our bounding box. And when I activate it, you can really see the fall off here, this red circle inside. So you really have instant feedback, and the entire tool is pretty much self-explaining. You can change colors, you can apply ranges as you know it from vertex maps and the fluids display tab. And you're also not limited to a single visualizer. You can add more boxes in different areas or analyze certain daemon combinations. And this is simply done by activating and deactivating the daemons here. So when I add vortex as well, we have another field, more complex, and then I really can switch off what I don't want to see. And maybe you have to update a little bit. So now we have only the noise field and so on. So it's really a very convenient tool that can save you a lot of time. Yeah, now let's take a look at the weight maps. With weight maps, we're able to apply a particular color to each emitter and create a blending effect. And therefore, weight maps only make sense with at least 2 fluids or 2 emitters. And here we have 3 emitters. And to get this color blending effect, I've activated the mesh nodes weight channel. And let me show this to you. I'm going to delete the visualize, it's no longer needed here. So, all right. And here we have again our 3 emitters. And here's also a frame from the fluid. So here we have this weights map option here, and I've chosen from emitters. And if you want to mix fluids, you simply choose fluids, and here it's going to be emitters, of course. And you can also see that I've changed smoothing lengths here to a value of 3 to get a better color transition. And when you build the mesh, RealFlow creates 3 vertex maps, and I've pre-adjusted my values already, and I click on build mesh, and please again watch the measure here. It takes a few moments. It's a more complex mesh. Yeah, and now we have again our speed tags here. They are really necessary for motion blur effects, for example. And then we have weight 0, weight 1, and weight 2. And there are also 3 materials. That's purple, orange, and blue. Purple is going to be the base color, so it doesn't require a map here. It's also the first material, as you can see here. So if you apply the weight 0 map to the purple material, then you will get transparency effects in areas where the fluids overlap, and this is normally not wanted. So we can go ahead with the orange material. And here we need a vertex map. So I activate the alpha channel again. The workflow is exactly the same as before. Under effects, I choose vertex map, click on the white square, and here I'm going to drag weight 1 to the orange material. And the same applies to the blue material. I've prepared that already, and here it's going to be weight 2. So with just a few actions, we're able to blend the colors, and with smoothing length scale, it's possible to create softer transitions. But to say it again, when you change this parameter, you have to rebuild the meshes. Yeah, and here's again the rendered version of the complete simulation. Now you can see these color blending effects and how I achieved them. Yeah, and we can also extend our feature list now. So the visualizer is a powerful yet easy to use tool for force modeling. We have the option to create weight maps from emitters or fluids for color blending effects. And there's a smoothing parameter to blur the channel and weight maps. Yeah, and finally, I want to show you some improvements in 2.5, and let me start with the image-based emitter here, because in previous versions, it was very difficult to get an idea of the emission pattern size and orientation in space. It was also impossible to use animated textures, but all these limitations have been removed. So I'm going back to Cinema 4D, close this one. Yeah, and the basic mode for the image emitter is still the same. So I add an image emitter and make it a little bit bigger here on the object, so you have a better view of what's really happening there. And I'm going to hide the display icon. Okay, that's good. So first of all, I create a material. And I add a texture. And this can be an image or a QuickTime movie or any other movie or image sequence or one of Cinema 4D's noise textures. Then I adjust the colors. I'm going to enhance contrast here a little bit, and then I animate the whole thing. And here we can see the preview. So some pretty nice pattern here. Okay, and now I combine the texture I've been adding here with the emitter. So I go to the emission tab, and here you can see the texture field, and you drag the preview icon to this field. And now we can see how the pattern looks and scales in space. And when we simulate, we can see the particles. But with some patterns, like Voronoi, for example, or huge bitmaps, the process of sampling the texture can be very slow. And therefore, we've introduced a way to control the texture's resolution internally. In Cinema 4D's preferences, you can find the RealFlow entry, and there you have the texture sampling resolution. And I'm going to reset, make this a little bit bigger. And with a value of 32, for example, you can see this pixelated look. And with 512, the texture is smooth again. And another improvement with these area-based emitters like circle, square, triangle, or image is the new volume handle. Maybe it's a bit difficult to see, but there's an orange dot here in the emitter center. And when you drag the handle, you can create a particle volume interactively. And you can also see how this parameter, your volume parameter, is updated in real time and interactively. So that's very helpful if you want to adjust the particle volume to an interacting object, for example, without having to guess values. Yeah, the connection to thinking particles has been improved as well, and we've introduced a completely new workflow. So you create a fluid simulation as I did it here already, and then you go to Cinema 4D's thinking particle settings. That's here. There you add a new group with a right click on the all group, click on add, and it's a good idea to rename this group to something meaningful, for example, fluid. And then you drag this group here to the fluid container. Under particles, you'll find a thinking particles entry, and you guess it, the concept is again drag and drop. And now you can see the typical thinking particles representation already. And since we're talking about thinking particles, there's also something new for all turbulence FD users. In previous versions, it was really necessary to go the detour via thinking particles in conjunction with turbulence FD. But our nice friends at Chaucer established a direct connection between a RealFlow fluid and a turbulence emitter. So all you have to do is to apply an emitter, a turbulence FD emitter, to a fluid or an emitter. That's completely up to you. And then you create the turbulence FD container, you make your settings, and then you simulate as usual. But if you still want to use thinking particles, for example, if you work on them with MoGraph, then you can do that, of course. And here, please don't misunderstand me here. I didn't clear the thinking particles feed, so this is no longer necessary as said. Yeah, and I've also prepared a preview from a simulation with high viscosity fluid strength for you. And this shows the perfect combination of RealFlow for Cinema 4D and turbulence FD. So this really opens a whole new world of possibilities You can ignite gasoline. You can create smoke and fire from our particles. So we really connect two fluid simulation tools, and that's really fantastic. Yeah, and last but not least, we have another highly requested feature for you, and that's offsets. Now, every fluid, rigid, elastic, and mesh container has its own offset parameter, and you can find it in a node's cache panel. And here it is. And this offset makes it possible to shift the starting point of a cached simulation to your needs, and you can do that for every simulation node individually. And now you're able to synchronize your simulations with other Cinema 4D elements without fancy workarounds like renaming the cache files, for example. And there's also a global offset parameter in the C node, also on the cache, and that's frame offset here. And that's very convenient if you want to change the start frame for all simulation elements at once. But this global offset also affects the other nodes. And the rule is simply a node's total offset is frame offset plus the node specific offset. So when frame offset is 100, for example, and the fluid's offset is 25, then the final offset will be 125. So these are the most important novelties in RealFlow Cinema 4D 2.5, and we can also complete our feature list. The image emitter shows the emission pattern in the viewport. The image emitter supports animated textures now, and you can adjust the texture sampling resolution to speed up things. Area-based emitters have a handle now to create particle volumes interactively. There's a new workflow for converting RealFlow particles into thinking particles. Turbulence FD has a direct connection to all RealFlow particle sources, including rigids and elastics. New global and node-specific offsets make it possible to adjust the starting point of cached simulations individually. And finally, we've added a fall-off to the D-spline daemon. Then we have better mesh normals, and we've improved the stability of GPU simulations. All right, that's all from over here. You will find a recording of this webinar in our blog within the next days. And maybe you're expecting a question and answer session now, but this time we want to try something else. My colleague Jana mentioned it already.
Yes. Hi, Thomas. Hi, everyone, again.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'm not completely ready. One moment, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No worries. So here's again the email address where you can send your questions to. But please understand that we're not able to provide production support through this address. We can really only answer product-related questions here. And then we'll be going through everything and publish a Q&A document in our blog as well. So just keep an eye on blog.realflow.com over the next days. And now let me say thank you very much for your attention and have fun with RealFlow, Cinema 4D, and Turbulence FD. Goodbye.